We're trying to understand the logic with regard to the goods that are covered by the tax break. There's the Christmas tree, but not the Christmas decorations that are put on the Christmas tree. It's very sad to see a Christmas tree without any decoration. So we're trying to look for philosophy. If I was Pierre de Coubertin, I would say healthy mind in a healthy body. As for you, I can see there is bad food, and we are excluding all sports equipment, hockey equipment, basketball equipment. This measure excludes everything related to arts, music. We can get a copy of a guitar, like a toy that is a guitar. But if I want to gift an actual guitar to my child, I cannot get the tax break. I can get a tax break to buy shoes, but not ballet shoes. So anything that has to do with sports, arts, are excluded by this measure. Same for coloring books, coloring pencils. Who was in charge of this list? What is the logic behind all of this? Sports and arts, culture, activities are not part of this tax break. Healthy food is not part of this tax break. Who came up with this list? It seems that this government is promoting bad food, video games, instead of sports and culture.
Thank you for that question. I would like to remind you of questions that were asked by senators for small and medium-sized businesses. There is a pragmatic approach linked to this and these measures. You are right. It was really hard to decide what would be included in that measure. It was essential for us to know which things were already included in this fiscal measure before implementing that idea. So we got advice on what was possible. That is one side of it. But why would we put a barcode for skates or shoes? It's not that complicated for any Canadian Tire store. We started with food, with groceries, anything that we eat. We did that because we understand that when we speak of affordability, this is where we have to start. If we help people buying prepared foods, we need to think about cafes and other stores. I think that you have heard from restaurants, they also need help. When it comes to clothing, children clothing in particular, diapers, or anything a child needs, well, this is already defined in the tax code. I think that anyone would agree that one of the most important elements of affordability would be helping parents and grandparents to buy shoes, clothes, gloves for children. I understand this explanation. However, I don't understand the logic behind it.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for being here, Minister. Earlier, you were asked about how the list was chosen of items, and you said a pragmatic approach was taken, but I don't think we heard any logic underlying that pragmatic approach. We know the provinces were not consulted in advance, but now you want them to proactively join the federal government. Yesterday, Senator Ross asked the sponsor in the Senate Bill C-78, whether any business associations had been consulted in advance before this was launched. And she indicated that none were consulted. So can you help us understand that? How do we square that peg with what you said earlier, that you work closely with businesses?
Yeah, I think the comments that we've heard publicly from business associations really speak for themselves. And I'm going to quote Kelly Higginson, the president of Restaurants Canada, who said, "This is a big win for the restaurant industry and comes after months of relentless advocacy from Restaurants Canada."
With respect, Minister, we did hear you say that earlier, and
Yeah.
thank you for providing us with that. But I'm talking about, was there any consultation with any of these partners who are having to join in? They're being recruited by the federal government to implement this plan. Was there any consultation?
So I sincerely am trying to answer the question. My point is, and I think the quote from Ms. Higginson illustrates this, we have been hearing, as I'm sure you have, both from Canadians saying, affordability is a challenge from us, and from restaurants, from grocery stores, from small and medium-sized businesses, that they would like to see the government acting on affordability because that will help their customers. And they have come to us with many different suggestions. So that's what I have in mind when I say we have been talking to them, and that's what you've heard directly from them as well.
Thank you.
Merci. Thank you, Senator Deacon. Senator.
So I have two questions, one for each.
Finance first, that would be appreciated. Just trying to get a rationale for the list of products included in Bill C-78. What was the rationale for determining the specific list of qualifying goods included in Bill C-78, particularly the decision to exempt alcohol, snacks, and candy from HST, GST? The second part, were consultations held with other federal departments such as Health Canada to access potential public health implications of including these items?
On the list of items that are included in the temporary relief, the Minister of Finance has already addressed that question during her testimony here a few minutes ago. She did mention the fact that some of the items were already described in the legislative framework that supports the GST-HST in Canada. And in respect of food items or different, including different beverages, there is already an understood list of items that are currently subject to the GST. They are defined under Part 3 of Schedule 6 to the Excise Tax Act, and basically in C-78, we have a provision, the new Section 11 to the new Part 11 under Section 2, that kind of makes all those food items and beverages temporarily excluded from the GST, HST for 2 months. So it's really because some of those goods were already described and included in the legislation and could easily be administered by the CRA and by businesses.
So some of the products were already registered, so they didn't have to be adjusted. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, do you want Dominique to?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. As my colleague said, in fact, the way it works, or at least the structure of the GST legislation at present, there's a schedule in the Act which sets out the goods and services that are already tax-free. And the example that is used is certain basic grocery items. The way it works is that all food and beverages in Canada are already tax-free, except if these items are there are exclusions set out in the Act. It's a list of items. The way the structure of the legislation that is before you is drafted, what that does is it carves back into the list of items for which basically the exclusions of food items which would not be tax-free but rather would be taxable. It brings those items into a tax-free status, and that is one of the mechanisms to bring those items into the scope of the legislation such that they would not be subject to GST, HST. In addition, there are certain provinces, harmonized provinces in Canada, that have already provided a point-of-sale rebate in respect of certain items. For example, in Ontario, to use that example, children's clothing, diapers, car seats, to name a few of these items. And those particular items, in fact, are already also defined in GST, HST regulations. And so the way that the bill is drafted is it refers to those existing definitions. And as a result, that assists, on one hand, vendors in understanding the interpretation of the law, but also, on the other hand, the Canada Revenue Agency in administering the law based on the existing definitions.
Can I ask one more?
Non, parce qu'on a 4 minutes, mais...
No, because we have 4 minutes, but if you allow me, I am going to pick up and ask my questions right now because they're about that. I feel like we're being taken for a ride here. Like a musical instrument is already defined in the act. You use a musical instrument. Use the term musical instrument. So if the government decided not to include it, it's not a classification or definition problem. You have been hyper imaginative to define a Lego game. I cannot believe that the reason why the credit is not here is that because we did not have the signification of what a musical instrument is. Like, we have to talk seriously. Like, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So indeed, there are a few different categories of products. They are within the scope of that bill. Have quoted the example of basic food items on the one hand, and on the other hand, some items that are already subjected to or alleged from or removed from the HST in some provinces. So yeah, new definitions have been drafted. They're included in the bill, but in the end, the decision of what's taxable or not is a decision made by the government. When, like the minister has already said, it was the government's decision to say whether yes or no an item would be taxable or not to be included in the bill. So the choice comes from the government. So the classification issue is not really the rationale of the decision when it was classified. It was there, but you were very imaginative if it didn't match any categories to put them in. So if something is included in the application of the bill, is decided by the government. So some definitions are already used in some cases, as I've already said, but it also simplifies the implementation of the law for some vendors who already sell these products and administration for the CRA. But in the end, the decision of the definition of a taxable product is the decision of the government. Thank you, Senator Dalphond. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like the agency to explain to me the controls and the follow-up that's being done with businesses. As we heard, 2 federations of small and medium businesses, mostly retailers and grocers. They're telling us that it's kind of complicated and they might make mistakes. So I imagine that your calculations have included these mistakes, and it's only going to be a 2-month thing. So are there any verifications that are going to be done after the fact, seriously, or are you just going to say we're just going to believe everybody to their word and we are going to assume that everybody respected the rule of law? So maybe there could be a $200 or $1,000 that are missing, might cost them $10,000 in accounting fees. Do you have any answer for that?
Hill Bay Hall, Canada Revenue Agency. I'm the Director General of the GST, HST, and Digital Compliance Directorates on the compliance side of the House. I'll respond to the question through you, Mr. Chair, by saying we understand the challenges businesses are facing. We already have excellent relationships with all stakeholder associations, many of which have been brought up over the past hour and a half. The measure is still in its early days, and we're still finalizing our compliance approach, but what I can say is the CRA will be taking a practical approach to compliance. So we'll be dedicating our efforts in instances where businesses are willfully and egregiously refusing to comply. Businesses that are making reasonable efforts to comply with the legislation, should it be passed, will not be the focus of our compliance efforts.
Et puis, est-ce qu'ils avaient une espèce de centre d'appel qui est disponible pour les entreprises?
Is there some kind of call center that's available for small businesses where they could contact people to have information? So I understand that it's not a problem for Amazon or such. They have a centralized system. I know there are some food restaurant chains that have a uniform systems, but the problem is the small grocer with his small business, his shoe store, for example, what's going to happen if I cannot make sure I understand the exemption?
The Director General of the GST HST Rulings Directorate of the Canada Revenue Agency. Yes, we do have call lines or business and individual inquiry lines. There is a GST HST Rulings technical line. We're also getting questions coming in from retail grocers, the CFIB, that we've been actively responding to. We have information on our website that we are redirecting individuals, businesses to, and we're taking an intel of the questions that are coming in and hope to provide additional information on the website in order to be able to address the questions. As you can imagine, it's impossible to address every single question that is coming in, so we are looking at the questions that in terms of, what are the ones that we're going to hit the most, but we definitely will take any calls or anything in relation to that comes to us.
So it's going to happen really fast. It's going to happen for 2 months. We're going to change the rules of the game, and then we're going back to normal.
Working with what we have now, there's obviously a need for resources as we move forward. We're in the midst of determining that right now and sort of what requirements are needed.
Senator McAdam.
Okay, thank you. We heard last night that the Retail Council of Canada mentioned at Finance Committee that a few things around compensation. They're wondering about compensation to businesses to deal with all the additional administrative burden and extra costs that would be incurred. And because this is being done on short notice, I'm wondering if there was any consideration given to compensating businesses.
Bill C-78 does not contain any specific provision to compensate for these costs. There is an expectation that some of these businesses may see an increase in their sales, in particular during the relief period. I'm thinking here about the restaurant industry in particular, in those days after Christmas and the New Year, where typically businesses is down. GST HST in Canada is collected and remitted to the CRA by businesses without any official compensating cost. This is understood as being part of the cost of doing businesses in Canada.
Okay, I just had one other quick question. We also heard at committee last night that, and I can't remember which witness, but that a concern that suppliers, distributors, wholesalers weren't aware of the impact of this bill on their businesses. I'm just wondering about, communication with all affected businesses. I'm just wondering if you have any response to that.
Yeah, again, as I mentioned, we're putting the information on our website. There will be social media as well, trying to target individuals to come to, and businesses, suppliers, wholesalers through our website information, through the large organizations, hoping that information will go down as well too. We will respond to questions that we have, and we're working best in a timely fashion to be able to get that information out as fast as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Forest. Senator Smith. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Last night, Dan Kelly, one of our witnesses, president of the CFIB, told our committee, quote, "Not one business will get this right," end of quote, due to the complexity and logistical challenges posed by the policy. Businesses face high compliance costs, tight timelines, and confusion over the eligibility criteria for exempt goods. These challenges disproportionately affect small businesses. Question, given the widespread logistical and compliance issues raised by SMEs, what measures is the government taking to ensure that businesses, particularly small enterprises, receive the support and guidance they need to implement this policy effectively and without undue financial burden? Like the basic line was, we've only got 10 or 12 days to implement this. It's an unrealistic expectation, despite the good nature of the bill.
So thank you very much for the question. And I have a great deal of respect for Dan Kelly. My office works with him closely, and I do too, and I've talked with him about this. I also have a great deal of sympathy, as I think we all should, for the challenges of running a small business. And, you know, the government is available to provide guidance and support. One of the reasons I hope the Senate, and I'm grateful to the Senate for acting with alacrity on this measure, is to give businesses certainty. I do want to say that we have been hearing publicly from many businesses who are delighted by the measure. And I'm just going to quote Kelly Higson, who's the president and CEO of Restaurants Canada. And she said, I quote, "This is a big win for the restaurant industry and comes after months of relentless advocacy. We also appreciate that the relief will be extended over January, which is typically the lowest time of the year for our industry, and right through to Valentine's Day." The Retail Council of Canada was similarly totally enthusiastic. And I'm going to quote them again, "The RCC has held multiple discussions with the Federal Department of Finance on GST holiday measures." Mio and I can confirm that is the case, with successful advocacy on several specific points, and more generally persuading finance and the CRA to take a flexible, common sense approach to putting the policy into practice. So I have a lot of sympathy for the challenges of small businesses every single day, including with this measure. But I also want to assure senators that we have worked closely with business representatives in putting this together. And we have heard, there is in the public domain a lot of very positive feedback.
Supplementary?
Yes.
How does the government plan to address the disproportionate impact of compliance costs? Because that was the big critique that we received last night, and from the various witnesses who gave us percentages of 60, 70, 80%, questioning not necessarily the thought behind the program, but the execution by the government. So I guess, what can you tell us, will the government plan, how they will address the disproportionate impact of compliance costs and administration burdens on smaller businesses compared to larger corporations, so that there's fair treatment for everyone, and that when someone goes, oops, we made a mistake, the Canadian Revenue Agency is not going to jump on it and penalize people, because there is a time issue here that has to be respected.
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's very important for all of us to be sensitive to the real challenges of running a small business. Our government certainly is. We see small businesses as the heart of our communities and the heart of our economy. Officials have definitely been working with small business on these measures. We're going to continue to do that. And your advice, Senator, that a very positive, sympathetic attitude be taken at all stages of this is advice that I strongly agree with.
Merci beaucoup, Sénateur Mével-Deschênes.
Senator Mével-Deschênes. I would like to go back on the survey that has been done by the Independent Business Society, most people were against this tax break. This was because of how much of a burden it was in terms of red tape. For small and medium-sized businesses, it was indicated that the average cost to implement this measure was of $1,000. So there's a middle class, and that corner store manager is part of the middle class. That person will have to pay $1,000 to implement that measure, so they are losing with that measure. Senator, with much respect, I cannot totally agree with you. I believe that we need to respect the work done by small and medium-sized businesses. They work really hard every day. I respect them. I know you do as well. I have said already that restaurants owners, small and medium-sized businesses owners that have said that this is a good measure for them as well. I know that some of these owners understand that it comes with a little bit of work. This is something we have to respect, but we need to respect the people who said that this was something good, that this would help them. I have quoted some of them. We worked with representatives from small and medium-sized businesses, grocery stores, restaurants, etc. They support this measure. We also talked about people that said that this would be helpful. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lafreda. Next question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you for being here this evening. I have a few questions, one for Revenue Canada, for Sahil and Louisa. We've heard from stakeholders that it is complicated in a sense. Manufacturers didn't know, weren't aware that they're exempt. Sahil, you're a digital genius, I hear, and have we not reached out to these manufacturers? We know who they are, right? And have we not reached out, communicated, and told them, hey, here's the exemption you do have. Why do we still hear that so close to the measures being put in place? And Louisa, maybe the question I have for you is, given that it's very complicated, and we heard our chair explain how complicated that is, and I was aware it was a little complicated, and it's complicated for the small businessman, the small and medium-sized enterprises. What are we doing to really assure that they will get it right? And if they don't get it right, how much leeway will they have? And I know Revenue Canada, when they hit hard. And how much leeway will the small businesses have? There is concern.
So again, in terms of the information and trying to explain it, on our website, we use plain language to be able to make sure that they understand the information. And in terms of, based on the provisions of the legislation, from respect to the compliance portion, I will refer back to my colleague, Sahil, on that piece. In terms of the stakeholders, we do have a stakeholder desk that we communicate with. We will be having an upcoming meeting with stakeholders, again through CFIB and Retail Canada's, Retailers Associations, restaurateurs, etc. In terms of the manufacturers, again, those have not been coming to us other than hearing it from your folks. On that piece, we can look into what we can or cannot provide or share with them as well. That's something that we will take back and look at consideration of what we can do in that area.
Sahil? I've been waiting all night to hear.
Thanks. Well, I'll try to respond the best I can. So you're right. Like, the focus of our efforts are on, I mentioned it earlier, the focus of our efforts are on individuals. We're dedicating our efforts to registrants, GST registrants that are willfully non-complying. in terms of where the non-compliance, the intent is in there, that's not where we're focusing our efforts on. With respect to the question about, if I understood it correctly, on how can we support businesses in terms of updating their point-of-sale systems?
Yes.
So we have excellent relationships, just not with these stakeholder associations, but many large businesses. We do understand the needs of large and the capacity of large businesses. Small versus medium businesses is different. That is why our communication efforts are targeted. So in terms of how we would approach large businesses versus medium or small businesses, the type of information they need, the channels we use are it really is quite multifaceted. So those conversations are going. As questions are coming in, we welcome these questions. Some of them are questions we may not have thought of before. So what I can do is just assure the senators that these conversations are regularly happening, and we're doing the best we can to respond. We are not in a position to update their point-of-sale systems for them, but with respect to guidance that they need, questions that they have, just making sure that information is being made available in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you.
For 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The history of the Canada Revenue Agency dealing with business and the Canadian public is not reassuring, and I'm being as diplomatically positive as I can be with those comments. Senator Delfont mentioned, wouldn't it be helpful to have a call center? At one point, the CRA claimed that 90% of their calls were successfully completed when you called the call center. The Auditor General did an analysis of that and found that the CAR achieved this success rate by blocking 28.9 million of the 53 million calls received, and they excluded those blocked calls from their calculation. When blocked calls and other factors were considered, the agency's overall success rate was 36%. We then had the problem with the disability tax credit, where historically 80% of applications for the benefits by Canadians with diabetes were approved. However, a few years ago, it was revealed that people who were previously approved were being rejected. The revenue agency position was, quote, no changes have been made to the eligibility criteria. However, documents obtained by Diabetics Canada showed a CRA email that they were modifying the, quote, variables for life-sustaining therapy clarification versus with a new variable. In effect, diabetics who previously qualified for the disability tax credit were disallowed. When confronted with this new evidence, the CRA backed down. So the question is, given what is said and what happens, are we not on the verge of another Donnybrook here, where in 2 years this committee will be hearing why businesses were punished for what's trying to be implemented, as Senator Lafreda said, in a very short notice? Is that not going to happen again? And I have pages here of similar examples of what CRA said and what they actually did. How can we reassure business and Canadians we're not going to have a repeat of what the CRA said in their misleading statements in the past?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, those areas are outside I'm not the subject matter expert for those departments. I was asked to appear on Bill C-78 specifically. What I can say as part of our public guidance is this is early days in terms of the measure. We're still developing our compliance approach, but as I've stated earlier, the intent and where compliance efforts will be dedicated is where there's willful non-compliance.
Madame Elizeau, vous sembliez...
Ms. Elizeau, you seem to know a lot about call centers. Can you answer this question?
Answer the questions related to Bill C-78 and its interpretation. This is also not my area of expertise. We have a smaller GST technical call center. The information is not related to my area of expertise.
Is anyone responsible for the culture of CRA, that they could change the misleading statements that they told Canadians to the reality? Can we have somebody like that appear before the committee on this topic and on this bill so we don't have repeats?
Ouais. On va voir le directeur parlementaire.
Yeah, the parliamentary budgetary officer will appear tomorrow at this committee.
Senator Deakin.
Much, Chair. I'll be very fast. Mr. Bahal, you are responsible for implementing this technically on behalf of CRA, as I understand your department, your area of the department. Is that correct?
Be my colleague. I'm on the compliance
So
side.
just when did you start to prepare for the implementation of this announcement on Thursday, November 21st? Was it before the 21st or was it after the 21st?
We started to prepare as soon as our colleagues in finance let us know that this could be something that is coming.
When was that?
It was a few weeks before the announcement.
Okay, so you did have some knowledge in advance of.
We did not have knowledge of the legislation per se, knowledge that this could be coming, but not knowledge of the actual specific provision so that we could prepare technical guidance out there at that point.
And you did have some influence over how it was designed then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
C'est bon, merci.